Welcome back to another episode of Gaia Gossip, a production of her Many Voices Foundation. My name is Mary Jane Oatman, your host, and I'm joining you from the ancestral homelands of my people in present day Idaho. I'm a member of the Nez Perce Tribe and super honored to be sharing today's conversation with you. An amazing human that wears many hats. Magnanimous Urban Grow and the work that she's doing there. We're going to talk about food systems. We're going to talk about regenerative ag. And also, we probably are going to throw just a little bit of hemp stuff in there because this warrior
Yeah.
has been blazing trails for her community and communities across the world with bringing about plant medicine healing. So, I am very honored to have Miss Dionne Holmquist join us today. Dionne is a native of Shadron, Nebraska, and she's been just doing some amazing work for therapeutic treatment, for land healing, rematriation. And Dionne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And yes, as you said, I do wear many hats, and I'm just grateful to be here to share about my work with Magnanimous Urban Grow here in Shadron, Nebraska, along with some of the other hats, as you said, that I wear with different boards and the work that I've been doing on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Yes, so with your extensive knowledge in these food systems and bridging that work in Indigenous communities, I just got to say, I'm fangirling over the work that you're doing to create and develop nonprofit work to restore our local Indigenous food systems. Can you just share a little bit of story behind your nonprofit work? Because this is really a game changer. I know it is for a lot of our tribal communities where we suffer with resource capacity issues, where nonprofits really step up.
Yeah, so, my work with Makoce Agriculture Development, we do have an MOU with Magnanimous Urban Grow as well. So, again, I wear those two hats. Shadron, Nebraska, just for those that are visual, is like 30 miles. It's in the panhandle of Nebraska. So, I grew up close to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And so, with the Pine Ridge, Mary Jane, it probably would be a dishonor if I didn't acknowledge Alex White Plume in this whole piece. And this might help kind of put the story together with the food systems and everything. But I was in Colorado many moons ago and for about 20 some years. And I was working in the treatment realm, as you mentioned. And this will hopefully all tie everything together in my long-winded story. But basically, through that work, we were so-called treating people. I also was a drug and alcohol counselor, and we were treating people, but I felt like we were not treating them. I felt like we were putting them in a box. They were coming into the system, and these were either teens or adults that I was working with. We were teaching workforce development, all of those pieces in that so-called colonized world. And so, the things that I noticed that were missing there that I always wanted was a garden. Here I was doing one-on-one sessions, group therapy sessions, but we were in these four, had the four walls around us. We didn't have these trees. And I know just sitting here in Mother Nature just brings a different sense of ease to my soul. And I remember asking, why can we have a garden at our treatment facility? And oh no, you gotta eat that food from Cisco. And when I went through to become a drug and alcohol counselor, they took us through all these different trainings, and you learned about the diets and all of these other things, but we learned about all of these different pieces of the mind, body, and spirit when we're treating people. And I just felt that we were only hitting the one piece when we had them in systems, and truly it's just a system. And so we'd get these kids coming in and we would sit with them and pop them, they'd be popping pills, and whether it was Depakote, Adderall, all of these things. And so again, long story short, I ended up getting burnt out in that field, and I ended up in the real estate world when cannabis and hemp was popping off at that time. And so what happened was is I stumbled on Alex White Plume's story. And so I'll try to kind of fast forward there. But in that relationship with Alex White Plume, as I learned about industrial hemp, I started to jump in there in Boulder, Colorado. I jumped into a lot of the different seminars and things that were available at that time for just learning. I started learning about just organic agriculture. And I remember one time Patagonia was putting on an event. And I remember looking at the sign they had on the stage and it said like 1% of the farmers are organic farmers. And so through my journey of treatment and learning about hemp and food, and just again, I just go back to mind, body, spirit. That is where that food piece came into play. And I always, moving back home to Shadron, it happened around the end of the pandemic. And where I'm at now, I'm south of Shadron, and these trees, it's considered Pine Ridge. And then you have the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And so, not to confuse it, but it's all, the Lakota lands, anyways, let's be real. And so, when I came back home, and as I was learning on this journey for hemp and cannabis and just organic farming, I was like, why are we not doing some of these things on our homelands in Shadron? And why is this not happening in Pine Ridge? Well, there are some really great things happening in Pine Ridge, and there are some really great things happening in our little hometown. But we just it's that aggregation that's missing. And so for instance, with my work with Makoce agriculture development, that was my long story to get to that point. That work there that they're doing is really great, and I've learned a lot in the last 4 years with, I mean, I can't take the credit, and I won't, for what they've done for the last 4 years as far as aggregating the different growers in the community for produce. And they really push that whole local produce. And what they mean by local is a 100-mile radius. And that's the same thing here for Magnanimous Urban Grow. So our farm is within that 100-mile radius that Makoche Agriculture Development is focusing on. And so right now on our farm, we're working towards, we have a regenerative pilot program that we were approved for within the USDA. And so we have this MOU with Makoche where we will be producing produce, and then we will be selling it to them, and it may go in food boxes. We have some other relationships on the reservation, not just Makoche. And so as our farm grows, so will all of the different relationships. And we're really about meeting people where they're at. And we all went through the pandemic together, and we have Walmart in Shadron. It's very similar as far as access to not healthy or fresh foods, because I had to drive 45 minutes one to go to a Safeway because they shut down our Safeway.
So nonprofits play a big role in kind of bridging that gap between tribal community and the like the really important work where there's the resource gap. Can you just share a little bit about what inspired your nonprofit work to restore the local indigenous food systems?
Uh, I would say, I'm sorry, then I got a bee that went right in front of my eyes, made me go cross-eyed there. So I would say that the the inspiration behind that work that brought me home ultimately was, one, first and foremost, family, but ultimately stumbling into the hemp and cannabis space. Being a former drug and alcohol counselor, at the time in Colorado, cannabis was illegal. And so when I stumbled on Alex White Plume's story in on YouTube, and I can still remember it to this day when I found it. I found Oweaku Bring Back the Way, which was the story of Alex White Plume being raided. And so, anyways, we'll fast forward to now on that nonprofit side. And so, what I did was I really immersed myself in learning about agriculture, not just about cannabis, not about just hemp, but growing food as just as a whole, and a whole systems approach. Because with my background in treatment, I I was in the Western medicine field, so to speak, but then my heart was pushing me towards more of the whole systems, holistic approaches. And so I think that, coming back home and working with different nonprofits like Makoche Agriculture Development, we have different nonprofits that I'm working with here in Shadron that are like ones with the Head Start program, and they do service. 4 different towns in the panhandle of Nebraska. And then there are other the can't even think of the name of the company that just reached out to us from Pine Ridge a couple days ago that wants to work with us on some food distribution as well. And so our goal is to work with those nonprofits that are servicing those local communities. And by local, I mean like within a 100-mile radius. That's the standard for Makoche. That's the standard for us at Magnanimous Urban Grow. Our farm is like from Makoche, we're about, I'd say about an hour and 45 minutes is how far our farm is from Makoche. So we're not that far. And, it's been really amazing to just see all of these different nonprofits on the reservation that just aren't getting the acknowledgement. I mean, I was blown away, Mary Jane, when I went on a tour a couple years ago and I just got to see all of these beautiful greenhouses on the reservation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, why are we not hearing about this? And, but they are servicing their communities. And like, there's a really cool place in Batesland that has, like, they have their storage underground and they have the greenhouses that are underground. They've got like 3 or 4 of them, and they're feeding their entire community, and I think that's really badass, and I think that that's something that when you talk about that inspiration, being in the city was a different type of inspiration because when I was in Colorado and I'd go to meetings in Boulder, I was blown away at the amount of farm to table restaurants there. And I was like, holy cow, this is beautiful. And then you come back home to Nebraska, for me, Nebraska, and it's farmland. I mean, across our road over there, I'm looking at hundreds of acres of just hay and wheat fields and alfalfa. And then you look over here at our little field because we're just starting here this year, and we've got these little rows of garden beds, but we're not trying to monocrop. We have a 5-year plan on what we want to do, but it's really important to work with those nonprofits that, one, have been paving the way and leading the way, but just filling that gap. And the gap that I see is the food production. And again, I'm not saying that we're the only ones because there are people doing it. So what we're doing is talking to those other food producers and being like, okay, well, you guys are doing that. Let's do this. We don't need to have egos. We don't need to compete. I mean, I love it when I sit in a meeting and somebody comes in and says, "We got a big order for cucumbers or zucchinis. Who here wants to grow it?" And that's the world I want to live in.
Oh, I love that. It makes me think of the reason why I started Tribal Hemp and Cannabis Magazine, because while across Indian country, hemp and cannabis was still really, really taboo, I was aware of communities that were embracing healing, that were doing, the work since, our elder and inspiration Alex White Plume was doing, before it was even cool. Before it was even legal, and shining the lights on the corners of our communities that were doing that healing and repair work. And that's also where I think that the work that you've done for therapeutic treatment has the opportunity to come to that full circle now that tribes are rethinking cannabis, hemp, cannabinoids in context of harm reduction. So I'm excited
Hmm.
for you to put maybe some of your therapeutic treatment hat back on within the many other scopes that you do, because you're right. Small farmers play such an integral role there so that we are less dependent on processed and hyper
Hmm.
processed foods. So, what you're doing, improving healthy access to foods, connecting people to the land. Can you just share a little bit about some of the results that you guys have seen on the strengthening of local economies? I think you kind of hinted to that with, like, you guys actually have projects coming in where you can say who wants to grow X commodity, or who wants to, to get in the pathway of this specific contract that we have.
Yeah, so here at Magnanimous Urban Grow, one of the things that we're really proud of, and my life partner and my business partner Nikki, I can't take the credit for this, but she got us filled out the application, and so we're one of the first farms in Dawes County in Nebraska that was approved for that regenerative pilot program through the USDA. And so that's a 5-year program is what we're signed up for. Yeah, I'm super stoked about it. And through that, it's all around that regenerative agriculture. And I'll share a story. We went and met with Chadron State College with Dr. Perlinsky, and he is the head of their rangeland management program. And I'm a former Chadron State alumni. I played golf and volleyball up there, and I've always wanted to be able to work with them again and give back. And so we reached out to him because we have certain soil requirements for this regenerative pilot program, and so you have to have certain certifications. And so when we went to meet with them, because I wanted it to be this whole farm, both my partner and I want it to be a learning opportunity. We want transparency. We want to share what we're learning. We're not, kind of like when you go in the cannabis and hemp space when it first started, everybody's like all secretive, and it's still that way, these egos. I'm like, no, I want you to take a tomato from our farm. I want you to take a tomato from Walmart, and I want you to test it and show our community the difference when we're utilizing regenerative agriculture practices. And so when we met with Dr. Perlinsky, it was really cool because he was excited. He was like, "We've been waiting for something like this." And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, like there's so many farmers around here. Like what is so special about this?" But it's all of the monocrop farmers that are really around here. There's not, anybody really, and I shouldn't say not anybody, there are very few people that are really focusing on this true regenerative ag and the local economy, because it takes time, it takes years, and we all know that fast food, fast, money, everything, it takes that time and patience. And I think that's what I really like, is the research part of it, because I want people to, I want to know more about the food that I'm eating. I mean, I'm still learning as well. I grew up in, what we have, Taco John's and Hardee's when I was growing up. It was at the beginning of the fast food industry piece. And so, I think with working with, as you were talking about these different projects, this whole regenerative pilot program has really opened a lot for Magnanimous Urban Grow. And, as I look out to our field, I'm like, I'm excited because we have a 1 acre, well, we've got multiple acres, but we're focusing this on a 1 acre plot. And this first year is just going to be three rows, 100-foot long by 30 inches. But within the 5 year plan, there'll be 60 garden beds. So within the 5 years of this regenerative pilot program, the ultimate goal is that we will have 60 beds of produce, all 100-foot long, ADA accessible. So this goes into that, creating that community. There's a program that's working with adults with disabilities, and plus the Head Start program. And again, I wanted about education. I wanted about accessibility for all, meaning to be out here. So we're going to make things ADA compliant. We have this program with adults with disabilities that's engaged, that they're excited to bring out. They have like separate houses that their clients live in, and they're always looking for outings. And the director of this one of the houses was like, Dionne, she's like, can we bring our clients out there? Like, can they pick their own vegetables? Can they do that? And so those are things that I'm getting excited for, because we are getting that community involved. And so they want to come out. So we're going to make sure we have spaces, that people, whether they're in wheelchairs or walkers, that they can come out. If they want to just sit and listen to the birds, they can do that. If they want to go and they want to help water, they want to help weed or do anything. I just think it's all about the quality of life, no matter what age you're in. I look at my aunts and an uncle that are, they have terminal cancer, and it's been really hard for the family lately. And I know that we talk about food as medicine, and that's what it is. It's been our environment. And so, I mean, whatever we can do to give people that quality of life through the food that they eat and this environment, then that's what we want to do. And the same thing goes, like we were talking to one of the scientists and researchers from Ogallala Lakota College. And so I'm going to be working with them at Makoce Agriculture Development on some stuff, but then they also want to bring some students out here and do some work with us on our soil health and different training. And so again, it's a really cool, beautiful relationship that we have with, our neighbors, and, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, and coming here. And so that community is important, and we want it to be able to, again, share so that people can replicate, because I'm not a scientist and I'm not an expert. I like to surround myself with people that know and understand and are just as geeked out about bugs and plants as I am.
I love the story that you just shared about reconnecting people to the land and really thinking outside of the box of what that access looks like for a diverse, age range in our community. That was, I mean, I'm just thinking of how that long-term sustainability for this project, you were thinking of that by integrating the aging process of our
Hmm.
elders, and our relatives, that are trying to figure out how to navigate, the landscape, on a set of wheels. So
Hmm.
um, is there any specific research projects that you guys have around the corner, specifically around this food as medicine concept? Because I'm thinking of all of the health index research, all of the quality of life research, and the engagement that you already have with tribal colleges and universities as well as state universities. So can you share with us, like, what is on the horizon for some of the qualitative and quantitative data that you guys are going to collect to share your story?
Yeah, so for instance, out here at Magnanimous Urban Grow, just as I was saying, across the road, we have those large scale ag farms. So we actually are going to be working with some researchers that are going to help us study the overspray of the pesticides and chemicals and seeing how far that's going. We also are going to be studying the water through, and you may have heard it on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So where I'm facing south, and so basically to the west, there's a town called Crawford, Nebraska, and there was large uranium mining for many, many years. And Alex White Plume's late wife, Deborah White Plume, fought to have that shut down and was successful. And but all of that, obviously, water and everything got contaminated coming this way to my hometown of Shattered, and then on all the way onto the reservation. And so I have some locals that I've known for years that grew up that work at the local hospital and have mentioned that they've seen a rise in cancer rates here in our hometown. And so, you know, again, I'm not trying to be Aaron Brockovich. I just want to I just want to have, like you said, I want to gather those baseline data points that we know this is where we're starting from. Kind of like even with myself. And so that is one of the things that my partner Nikki and I are going to be doing is we're going to be working with the holistic practitioner from Shadron here, Shelley Graves, and we're going to have her take some baseline tests, our blood, our wonderful weight, and all of those things. And really, we want to be able to study, you know, the foods that we're putting in our bodies. And you know, for example, I can hopefully give another reason why I'm so into this food as medicine piece. But when I was in Colorado and I left the colonized treatment world, I had a hair sample test done because I knew I was struggling with stress and PTSD. I'd been working with high profile sex offenders the last couple of years of my work there, and I could feel it. I could just feel this tenseness and tightness, but I didn't want to be on pills. And I didn't like to, I mean, I just looked at the world as like, oh my God, there's so much ugly out there. And I hated it. And I knew I needed to get out of it. But that's how I ended up around all of this. But that hair sample test, just through that, it was really interesting with this holistic practitioner because he was able to tell one that I drink a lot of root beer. I don't anymore because he's like, "Do you have you like have an allergy to vanilla because it's super high?" And I'm like, "No," but then I realized I drank a lot of root beer, and so I'm like, "That's crazy." But ultimately, in this test, this was really my pivotal point that impacted me in a large way. He tested, he said, "What do you want to test?" And I said, "Well, I know I have PTSD, I know I have anxiety, all these things." So when he brought my test results back, he said the range from 0 to 10, 10 is where you really need to address it. He's like, "You know, where do you think your anxiety is?" I'm like, "Oh, 10." And he's like, "Dionne, it's at 151." He said, "I don't know how you don't have a terminal illness." But the cool thing about this was he said, "The only thing that's in range are your cannabinoids." And I go, "What? You were able to even test that?" So my consumption of cannabis, I remember just being like, "What?" And so he's like, "I just don't know how you don't have some sickness or illness." I definitely wasn't eating that healthy at that time. And so, I mean, again, I'm not saying, oh, it's the end all cure all, you know, with cannabis, but at that point, I was like, oh my gosh. And so for me at that point, that's when I really started studying the foods. And I went to primarily plant-based diets and things. I'm not now because I moved back home. But I think that, you know, at that point, those are the types of things that's important for a community, that vulnerability to be able to share our stories. Because, you know, I know now moving back home, because after that test, they basically, I said, "Well, what do I do?" He goes, "Well, just go away and just be for a while." He's like, "What kind of work do you do?" And I shared with him, and he goes, "Oh my gosh, it's like being a police officer. Every, you know, profession has their anxiety and PTSD pieces." So I went and traveled and hit every hot springs in Colorado for a couple weeks. And then there was one day on that second week, and I was at Pagosa Springs, and I just broke down crying. It was a release, and I was like, "What is happening?" And but I remember at that point, and they put me on some like essential oils, and I did start with that plant-based diet. And he said, "You know, I can't tell you that the plant-based diet is the thing to do, but I can tell you that it may help." And I truly believe it because I called my mom and dad after I had that breakdown or whatever, breakthrough, let's call it. And I was like, "I'm back." I'm like, "I know that there's ugly in the world, but I know there's good, and I know I have a lot of good to still do." And so it was at that point that I was really focused on the food, and I really did dive into that. But then I moved back home. I mean, I'm living proof that I came back home to where we don't have access to fresh foods. I have the same Walmart that the people from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation have to come to. Our Safeway just shut down a couple months ago. So we have to shop at the dollar store or Walmart. And, so I went from Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and all that stuff in Colorado. And the irony again of a concrete jungle having more access to fresh foods than all of this is ridiculous. And so, that's more of my inspiration. And, again, I think part of my story that I want to get back to. I mean, I put on 40 pounds probably moving back to this environment. And it's ridiculous. I can't go into the store and find fresh foods. And there's some farmers markets every now and then. And so all of that and that experience really has driven a lot of my work, not only with Magnanimous Urban Grow, but with Makoce Agriculture Development, because it's the same thing. Diabetes, cancer. I mean, again, the reservation has, they can go to Rapid about an hour away. So, or they come here. And so it's just, I guess those are things that I felt was important to share, just to be my true authentic self. And that's why I think these baseline datas, whether it's our health, our soil, our air, I want to put that out of what we're finding here, what I'm finding on any of the farms I work with on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, whether it's for produce, hemp, or cannabis. We're really, I guess, not forcing it, but encouraging that regenerative agriculture practice on all of those types of farms. So that was long winded, but there
You
you go.
know, no, sister, we're at this point where we kind of do have to like kind of force it, similar to the Just Say No campaign, how that was just forced down our culture. That we're now in this position of re-embracing our cultural values, our aspects of what restoration looks like from that position of traditional ecological knowledge, but you sharing your specific personal story. um, that's a part. I mean, I'm sitting here healing through a part of your story because it was very similar. Living, working off reservation outside of my community, healthier access,
Mhm,
move back home, very similar situation. And I think, on my own healing journey as well, going through my divorce, where I wanted to blame everything around me. And so I started calling my hometown, my beautiful community, Kamui, where I come from, which is the Valley of Hemp. I started calling it Fat Kamui, and I was blaming the place.
mhm,
And it started to create that imbalance. And it is, it's that, it's everybody has that own personal journey to reclaim that. And the more that we share our stories, I do believe that it encourages and inspires others to share that. You mentioned a very critical name earlier that I think bonds so many of us in the plant community, and that's Alex and Deborah and
mhm,
the work that they did and the legacy that they've created, to be bold and to be brave, to not seek permission to heal ourselves through
mhm.
this work or to protect our Mother Earth, which that's she's our kitchen. I mean, we should, as you said, be able to walk out the back door and be able to harvest like was, done for tens of thousands of years in our homelands. And so this rematriation of the hemp plant itself, I always, like you, I give full credit and endorsement to the White Plume family,
Mhm.
because I was a senior in high school
Wow.
when I first read that same article that you were talking about. And you can't unsee things.
Mhm,
That's what hemp has done, I think, for a lot of us in this work. But it's tied to unhealthy homes lead to unhealthy communities, and then it just kind of is this downward spiral. So can you just share a little bit more about the work that you are all doing to create more of that holistic wellness? It's health, it is nutrition, it is safe places to be able to lay your head and breathe in clean air.
yes.
So many things about it, but we always address it from these silos. You guys are knocking down silos. Share with us how you're doing that in hemp specifically, because the housing crisis in Indian country is our number one challenge right now.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it goes back to that research piece. And, with after meeting Uncle Alex and Aunt Deb, I remember Deb sitting on my porch in Thornton, Colorado, and all she ever asked for me that one day was, and it just has stuck in my mind, is she's just like, Dionne, we need you to learn and just bring that education back to our people, bring the medicine home to our people. And there was another Native woman that, from Standing Rock, that had supported my journey on the hemp and cannabis side, and it was the same thing. She's like, Dion, I'm not asking for anything back in return, but you just keep learning and bringing it back. And I'm like, I don't know, I just found out about this plant, like, I mean, I knew cannabis, I had smoked it in college, and so I'm like, "That's a lot of pressure," and, but so that's again where that's why you saw me at NOCO, and that's why for me it was always and still is always important for that educational piece and appreciating people like yourself and others that are putting themselves out there to bring the message to the masses because, you know, when I was learning from Deborah about what was happening here in Chadron, it was just one of those things that, like you said, you couldn't turn it off. Aunt Deb was, talking about bringing that education back, and this other woman was as well. That's where this research has come into play, because as I was learning from Aunt Deb about all of the different things that the uranium mining had done to our lands and our waterways, I was like, again, holy cow, like, it scares me, it still scares me. I'm like, my parents, my nieces, my niece and nephew, we're all showering in this water, like, what is it? And so for me, it's that research, and so whether it's housing, whether it's, the mulch that we have hemp mulch out in our garden, like, what is that doing to our land? And so that's what I think is really important in my mind. I know some people, again, they wanna build really quick, they wanna do whatever, but I've seen the houses. I've worked with some of our people up on the reservation that we're working with that also own construction companies, and they're showing me pictures. They're like, Dionne, look at the tribe just hired us to go and gut this house and just mold, and it's these trailers, and it's like, oh, gross. I'm like, that's just horrible. And so for this hemp specifically, we're looking at, as we put up a structure, we'll be putting sensors in them, and we'll be getting all of that baseline data to see like what happens, because I do have a genuine concern of, I have seen people that want to grow hemp, these big farmers, and they're still spraying. Let's be real. They're not, they may not be telling people, but is that okay to put that hemp herd in our houses? We don't know. Are those pesticides gonna come through when it heats and cools? So as much as we don't like regulations, I still feel that there is a need, because I have seen some of those large scale farmers in South Dakota that bragged about it, like, oh yeah, 400 acres and but we've sprayed, to get rid of all those weeds. And so that's where I think, and so I think again that research is important, because the last thing I want to do is be helping and to promote to put up these houses and be like, "Oh yeah, you can get this hemp herd from these people over here," but we don't know what they've done. We don't know what was in their soil to begin with before they started growing hemp. And so I think if we can put those systems in places and show people that, it kind of goes back, as you know, in policy, the COAs and all of these things, but that's that seed to sale tracking. In my mind, it's important, because I want to know where my food is coming from. I want to know where the wall's coming from that's in my house now, those types of things. And so that's what I see as important, and that's why I'm excited that OLC, South Dakota Mines, CSU Pueblo's Institute of Cannabis Research, Chadron State, all of these institutions that are willing to work with not only myself but the other collaborators, whether it's Magnanimous Urban Grow or Makoce Agriculture Development. It's been really cool to see these multidisciplinary teams coming together and saying, "Hey, we don't want to touch the hemp plant, but we want to study the water around it because our university doesn't want us to, touch hemp." I'm like, whatever, I don't care. Just if everybody can have their little part and we can get that information, I'm cool. So South Dakota Mines, these and CSU Pueblo, they do all the stuff with touching of the plant. Ogallala Lakota College is helping with the water and some of the soil stuff too. And that is where I've been able to take my transferable skills from the treatment world, is building those multidisciplinary teams. And I think that's where some of the challenges are in some of these uh, industries, these emerging industries with these egos, because some people aren't used to working in multidisciplinary teams and they don't understand the benefit of that ecosystem. And it's like, look at this ecosystem and how beautiful it is when we work together with all these plants and animals. Just think if we all work together, how beautiful things could be. So that's where I think I see things going, is that research piece. If people can be somewhat patient, I mean, we've been waiting for this long, but no more synthetic houses, please.
You just hit the nail on the head. What you were just sharing there made me realize that when Indigenous communities are at the table with that traditional ecological knowledge, the way that things are so deeply interconnected starts to resonate a bit more. The silos, as I was mentioning earlier, can start to come down because of something that you had mentioned. We have to, it is such a flawed practice if we try to pretend like we're the first to do something instead of reflecting on the wisdom of our ancestors. If that burner's hot and I burn my hand on it, I want to tell my relatives it's hot, be careful, be cautious if you are going to touch
Yes.
it. And that's what I think is the differentiator between the work that you're doing between these two nonprofits that crosses over into interdisciplinary Western academia. They're learning from this knowledge, from the silos coming down. And what that does is eliminate some of those barriers that you were talking about earlier. Because the challenges that our Indigenous communities face are certainly engineered to some
Hmm.
extent. And I'm just lit on fire right now by the vision that you shared of the interdisciplinary approach where the Indigenous nonprofits are kind of leading that vision. So thank you for sharing that portion of the project, because I know that this is a scary process for a lot of people. So outside of
Hmm.
grants, how else are you supporting the work that you guys are doing? Because I know that the wide world of money that's out there for this type of work, it is pretty
Hmm.
robust. But the I think that the connection to how to integrate this is finally just kind of starting to come along in our own tribal
Yeah,
communities.
there's obviously, like you said, the grant piece of it. And as I'm learning more, there's a lot of different regenerative agriculture loans and different things out there that for native and non-native farmers. And it is a scary time to take out a loan right now. And we've been fortunate enough at Magnanimous Urban Grow to do a lot of self-funding, but we also, want to complement that with some different grants as we do get some different infrastructure. And with the other organizations, it's the same thing. It's donors and grants, but then we're getting creative. Magnanimous Urban Grow will have the nonprofit and the for-profit arm, and then you have Makoce Agriculture Development has their nonprofit. I believe they'll be developing a for-profit arm, and I think it's business development. Mary Jane, you're going around and seeing all these cool businesses in the cannabis industry, and it's just teaching that entrepreneurship just like what you're doing, and having whether it's basic resume writing and things like that for some of these people. And it's been really cool, like even on the cannabis side of things, when my partner and I helped one of these one of the first cannabis dispensaries on the reservation, and we worked the dispensary, showing the guys how to do it, the grandsons how to do it. And it was just really cute because they had never, I mean, these guys were just young bucks, and they had never worked in retail. And they'd done some construction for Gramps, and then here they are working at the drive-through, and you could just see them. We had to model it for them, and they're like, "Well, hello, how are you today?" I mean, very colonized, but just those customer service skills of just engaging with their people. And so it's been neat to see some of the economic development, not only just around cannabis, but hemp, is still kind of touch and go on the reservation right now. We're working on that policy work, but again, on the agriculture side up there, I'm really excited to see the growth that's already there and the growth that will continue. And like you said, with Makoche, they don't focus necessarily on growing produce themselves. They're just more of working to connect the dots for local producers. And so that's where I'm excited to see these small farms just continue to utilize the land that has been in their family for generations, and not selling them a line of bull by saying, hey, let's put a bunch of hemp here and you're going to be a millionaire, or let's even put a bunch of tomatoes, because we don't know. And so it goes back to just the very basics. Let's study your soil first. Let's study your sun patterns. Let's study how much rain. I mean, for us to start this farm this year on a drought year is pretty, interesting to say the least. And so, or for lack of a better term, but that's what we need to know, so that when we put up our agrivoltaics or a rainwater catchment system, we're justified, because maybe we only get so much rain, in one season. So I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And like you said, the traditional knowledge from native and non-native producers in this area that I'm in is just, it's invaluable. But the thing that in my mind that's not been traditional knowledge is how to work with the pesticides, and that's where that research in my mind comes in, because
Yeah.
many moons ago they weren't killing their food, and so they didn't have the remedies for that. And so if we can marry those two worlds together without colonizing it, I think it could be really beautiful. Or commercializing it, maybe that's the word. Yeah.
I yeah. No, I agree. I know that the soil of our Mother Earth can only improve through that evolution of thought, because we do have a lot of work ahead of us. And I'm so grateful for Magnanimous Urban Grow and for Makoce for stepping into community role to do that work. You specifically mentioned that you're working with young ones and like the Head Start age, and I think that that is really, like, I do believe you can teach old dogs new tricks. Don't get me wrong, but really shifting that vision of our young people to know you can grow your own food and food is medicine. So in closing, can you just kind of share with us what you envision for the future of both Magnanimous Urban Grow and Makoce, and how we can help that, how we as individuals, how as organizations, as inspired plant medicine people, how can we help this work and become a part of that vision?
What I see for both organizations, we'll start like with Magnanimous Urban Grow. Just like you said, I see, again, I'm blessed to be able to sit out here and just look around and as I visualize it, but we have our little farm stand, and I just see this being a community space, as I said, for so many different people. I even think of the elderly programs in town, and I want it to be that space that people can come and just breathe, and they can walk away with a strawberry, blueberry, whatever. But at the same time, showing people that we don't have to monocrop and we can feed our community. We can collaborate together. We can put our egos aside, and it's not going to be for everybody. And I get that. And I think that, working collectively with our allies on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, whether it's Makoce Agriculture Development or any other wonderful organizations that are needing some fresh produce, I think that's the thing. And the same thing there. Shoot, we get all of our chicken and our pork and everything from Pine Ridge up there from local producers. I don't buy anything from Walmart. And I think that's the relationship that I want to see continue. And that is something that with Makoce and Kelly Hunter, their former food hub director, that she did a really nice job laying that foundation to get the community engaged, get the elderly population and the elderly programs there in Pine Ridge to start wanting to buy the chicken. The school starting to buy the chicken that is grown there. And so, I think it's just complementing each other, Magnanimous Urban Grow and Makoche Agriculture Development, everybody just doing what they love to do and do a good job at it, and, pull each other up whenever we can and wherever we can, and bring 10 more people with you each time.
Absolutely. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Dion, for sharing your own personal journey, getting raw and vulnerable, because it helps other people heal in their own journey.
Well,
And so
thank you.
thank you so much for sharing with our Gaia Gossip
Well, thank you for
listeners.
the opportunity.
Join us next month for another episode of Gaia Gossip, and a huge gratitude to Her Many Voices Foundation. Please visit our website and learn more about the work that we do, as well as Makoce Agricultural Development and Magnanimous Urban
Got it.
Grow. So, Dion, in closing, can you share with everyone where we can learn more
Yeah,
about
you
your
can
work?
find us. We're just starting a Facebook page, so you can find Magnanimous Urban Grow on Facebook. We do have a website, so you could Google that, or it's Magnanimous Urban Grow is taken, but you can do mu-grow.com. And so we will be updating those. We also are starting a YouTube channel, and my cute nephew Rocco, we just got some podcast equipment that a friend is going to let us start using, and so my nephew, who's 9 years old, is really excited, and we want to. Speaking of the youth, I didn't share this, but he's wanting to do this podcast from the future, the youth, I guess, the voice of the future generations, and so he's going to be side by side with me interviewing people, and so he's excited for our YouTube channel as well. And so it's there. We just don't have the content on there, but Magnanimous Urban Grow on YouTube.
Thank you so much. much, Dionne. It looks like we have a lot to look forward to from the young people, as well as the dedicated work that you are all doing to restore food systems, housing systems with Magnanimous Urban Grow, as well as Makoce agricultural development. It has truly been an honor and a pleasure to share conversation with you today. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
you all.
Thank you again for joining us at Her Many Voices Gaia Gossip. Remember, whatever you do for another, you do for yourself. For more information, head over to hermanyvoices.org to learn more about other programs and get involved. From all of us at Gaia Gossip and Her Many Voices Foundation, thank you, and until next time.